Okay, I don't want to spend too long on this because we need to move on, and I want to start learning the Mishnah and the Gemara. But very briefly, what at the end of the day, what is exercising me so much? What is bothering me so much about the definition of the melachot of Boneh? So, I want to convince you of one level of being bothered, but if I can't convince you of that, at least I want to leave you bothered to a lesser degree. So let me start with the easy things that I hope will bother you, and then I'll try and share the more significant things that are that I also hope to convince you should bother you. But the easy things that definitely should bother all of us. And the basic question is what is the melachot of Boneh? What defines an av melacha and what defines the tolda? So Karen very helpfully showed me on Shabbos a one of these devator sheets that are given out, very wonderful devator sheet, in which a wonderful young man writes every week a short summary of the melacha and one page, sort of a 5 page of a summary of the melacha. And this week's was Boneh. So Karen handed it to me and said, "That's it. Let's just read the page, and then we can move on to the next melacha." Why are we spending so long on? No. Okay. Now this individual correctly said that which is oft stated, which is the melacha of Boneh means creating a construction that involves combining pieces together. That's the av. And the tolda is if it's one of the two, but not both together. So if you put pieces together, join pieces together, but it's not creating a building, then it will be a tolda. And if you create a building without putting pieces together, then that's also the tolda. And that's a nice, clear definition and fits everything we've learned. The problem is, and this is stage one of the problem, is it doesn't seem to fit at least how the Rambam classifies melachos. We've discussed how it's from the Gemara alone, it's sometimes difficult to work out what's the av and what's the tolda. Does this phrase that X is mishum Y mean that it's an av or mean that it's a tolda? All I really want to draw your attention to, because I don't want to go through this again, is have a look at the Rambam in Perek Zayin, Halacha Hey and Halacha Vav, where he's defining what an av and a tolda is, and then have a look at them in Perek Yud, where he's speaking about Boneh, and tell me if this fits if that fits fits the definition. For example, let me just give you one example. If you make a hole in a coop of Tarnagolim to let air in, is that an av or tolda? Have a look at the Rambam. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't look like he's saying it's tolda, but maybe I'm wrong. Have a look at smoothing out ground to remove a mound. Is that an av or a tolda? There it's very clear in the Rambam that it's an av, because you're creating more space by smoothing out the ground. There's no combining of parts over there. On the contrary, if anything, I'm removing a part. And nonetheless, the Rambam says this is an av. So that definition in that sheet, at least according to the Rambam, is inaccurate. So the one level of being bothered everyone should have, because this is just a mathematical problem, is that it's difficult to understand what defines an av and what defines a tolda. More profoundly, and this is where not everyone is happy with what I'm saying, I don't really understand what are we left with in terms of then what is the definition of the av, and if the av means anything involved with building, then what type of construction falls within that category, what doesn't? What makes, again, back to my first question, what makes something an av, what makes something a tolda? Why is making a hole in a lul perhaps an av type construction? Why is smoothing, what unifies, smoothing the grounds is part of the av, and erecting a tent is a tolda? Why? Like what's the difference between the two? If anything, erecting a tent is more like the av than the tolda. You're spreading a sheet over something. So I don't really understand what it would mean for an av melachot to mean anything involved with building. It would mean lots of steps then. Normally they would be subdivided into lots of melachos, but maybe not in this case. I don't know. If you think like, I don't know, making a garment would be an equivalent melacha, but we know making a garment has everything from shearing wool to combing it and cleaning it to twisting threads to weaving threads into cloth and to sewing the cloth together. So for some reason, is Boneh less distinct? All of these many melachos are merged into one, and they're all part of that. Maybe I don't know. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's interesting to me. what is it? All the steps in building? Any steps? And if it is, what classifies something as an Arv and a Tolda within that whole jumble of activities? So I would like it. It would be nice. Maybe this is a I don't know, a pot of gold and then a rainbow. Maybe this is an unrealistic pursuit. But it'd be nice to come out with an answer of what exactly is the creative activity that makes Boneh beyond more amorphous of it's not even just anything that makes a building, because then we extrapolate to even just putting an air hole in the building or smoothing out ground because you're making floor space, finding an area which is maybe what oil is. It just all seems an almighty mess to me, and it's just like a cluster of very semi-related ideas. I said last week, it's a bit like, the best definition we have of philosophy is what's philosophy, it's what philosophers do. So the best definition of we can come up with boners, it's what builders do. Okay, it leaves me an unhappy man. I'm sorry. Okay, so that's so stage one of what I'm asking is more mathematical. I hope everyone is bothered by this. Tell me a clear answer of what makes something an Arvin Boneh and what makes something a Tolda. Stage two is linked to that, but there's all these cluster of ideas. I don't really understand what the defining feature of the melachot is. Kosef, we have a fairly clear answer to it. It's sort of putting symbols down and that convey meaning. So I understand, why there's a relationship between symbols and numbers and pictures and words and letters, and sort of see that they coalesce quite neatly around an idea. I find that a little bit more difficult with Boneh. Sorry, Adam.
I was focusing on Soter.
Yeah.
Does every Boneh have to be related to Soter in some sense? It's also difficult to understand, but if you're thinking Soter, Amanat live not, so therefore Soter, a Boneh has to be something on which you could do Soter. I don't know.
Okay, it is an interesting thought. The only thing I'd say is we're struggling enough with Boneh. I don't even overcomplicate myself with Soter. So we will get to Soter. I think it's on our agenda to learn, but Soter's going to be more complicated than Boneh, not less complicated, because it's going to be undoing Boneh. Every time we come to an undoing melachot, we struggle with it. What exactly is its relationship to its parent melachot? The thing about Masechet, in many ways, Masechet was more complicated than Kosef, right? Because we were really struggling to understand: is Masechet just an unraveling? Is it a repair? Again, not everyone liked what I was suggesting there, but okay. So I want us to move on really, but that's my I hope that shares with you what's bothering me on the sugya. Okay, let's learn the Mishnah together, because we really need to do this and move on. So let's just read the Mishnah. Haboneh kama yivna v'yechayev. Haboneh kol shehu. So any kol shehu. We already said kol shehu doesn't mean no measure. It means it's not a halachic predetermined measure. It's a human utility measure. But there has to be some human utility in it. It means whatever has utility is enough to be the Shiur of Boneh, as long as it does something. It doesn't mean nothing. Culture is often translated as nothing. It doesn't mean nothing. It means something, any something. It's not like a top-down Halacha Moshe Sinai type Shiur. That's the point the Mishnah is saying. Okay, Masechet, I'm actually going to skip out because the Gemara will analyze it later. Hamaka bepatish. So I think we have learned together Makah b'Patish somewhat as a melacha, but we will relearn it now because this is one of the prominent sugyas. But let's spend a little bit of time on Makah b'Patish. So Rashi says, and don't forget, by the way, there's Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. So let's miss out the rest of the Mishnah for a few moments. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer, I have a different definition of Makah b'Patish. If you bang with the hammer on the anvil at the time of the melacha, chayev, you're also chayev because it's like fixing a melacha, and that's taken to mean he's saying this is a definition or part of the definition of Makah b'Patish. So let's just spend a little bit of time talking about Makah b'Patish, given that we learned it already, and I just want to use this as a springboard for Chazara. So Rashi defines Makah b'Patish as Hamakah b'Patish, so the fourth wide line in Rashi. A gamhu ba'avos melachos. It's also one of the avos melachos. So he reminds us that go back to Perek Klal Gadol, Daf Ayin Gimel, which we learned, and you'll see it there in the list. V'hu belaz pick. I think to this day we use in English a type of hammer, or that a type of axe is called a pick, right? Yeah, probably a toothpick is etymologically the same thing. Yeah. Okay. That you shatter the stone with minasela off the rock. You break the stone off the rock. La'achar shechotzav es ha'even soviv. After you hew around the stone, madul min hahar katsas. So you separate it off the mountain slightly. So basically, it seems they used to cut away rocks from the mountain till it was attached with a relatively small degree of attachment, and then they would whack it with a hammer, and the whole rock would break off. Then you makka b'patish makka gedola, you would hit it with a great blow. It would break off and ifeles. This is the end of the melacha of stone hewers, and therefore v'chol hagomeh b'Shabbos melacha told us makka b'patish. Any finishing of a melacha on Shabbos is makka b'patish. Okay, so this is an example. This is the example that any finishing of a melacha on Shabbos is makka b'patish. Meaning to say that there's 38 melachas that carry within them sort of intrinsic chashivas. That it's a melacha. Writing even a letter or two has a chashiva to it, has a significance to it. It's a melacha. Sewing has a melacha because it's a creative achievement. Then you have things which don't fall under any of the other 38 categories of significant achievements in their own right. But their achievement is that they're the finishing of a process. That's a type of achievement that gives it a status of melacha. That's more or less a summary of Rashi. By the way, you can see this the sort of reality of it. You can see all over the place in the ancient world, including at the Kosel and Ma'aras Machpelah and other things. You can see how you have a very nicely hewn rock, and then one little patch, I don't know, about this size, in the corner of the rock is rougher than the rest of the rock, and that's where it was broken off from the mountain. So you can still see to this day that it's less smooth than the rest of the rock. And it seems they didn't bother smoothing it in many constructions. They left that patch a little bit rougher than the rest. Very interesting. Okay, so that's Makeh Patish. Did anyone? Sorry. Well, no. Well, okay. So fair point, and we need to discuss this. The example Rashi gives is something that isn't any other melacha. So the point of Makeh Patish is that even though it's not the chashivas of any other achievement, nonetheless, it could be a melacha in its own right. Let me give you a modern example of this. If you get a flat pack football, and a leather football, and you blow it up, you inflate it for the first time. So a beach ball that you inflate and deflate the whole time, that's derech tashmisha, that's just how it's used, it's not finishing it off. But a football is designed to be inflated when it arrives in the post, and then that's it. Now it's used as football. Maybe top it up every so often, but basically it's now an inflated football. So which melacha is that? It's not Boneh, it's not Seser, it's not Kosev, it's nothing. So then it would be Makeh Patish. Toothpicks that arrive attached and you detach them, it's a problem actually, because often they're around in Kedushin and the like. This is certainly forbidden on Shabbos, perhaps even a deraisa, depends how you view temporary. We'll get to this actually later in today's share, hopefully, ironically. But how you view temporary things, toothpick is designed to be thrown out. On the other hand, it's a wooden stick, it's quite a permanent thing. There's nothing intrinsically flimsy about it. It's just we live in a time of wealth, and therefore we chuck these things out. Which malacha would it be? It's no other malacha. The answer is Makeh Patish. Okay, could you have something that's both? If I write the last two letters in a book, would this also be Makeh Patish besides Kosev? We have discussed that previously, and we will discuss it again, but the probable answer is no for some reason or other. In other words, the whole point of Makeh Patish is just finishing off where it doesn't have the chashivas of another malacha. If it has the chashivas of another malacha, then every time I bake a bread, why is that not also Makeh Patish? So the answer is probably because it has a more particular definition than Makeh Patish. Okay, so this is Rashi's example of it. Tosfos already points out, I didn't bring my main Gemara. Does anyone have can you just tell me how Rashi defines Makeh Patish and Daf Ayin Gimel? Okay, so I should have brought my Gemara here. I just brought my photocopied sheets of Gemara over here. So Rashi in Daf Ayin Gimel explains that Makeh Patish is the the craftsman, smiting on with his hammer on the sadon, on the anvil, thank you, to smooth it. That's what Rashi says there. Now, there's a couple of problems. One is that Rashi here gives a different explanation to what he gave on Daf Ayin Gimel for what Makeh Patish is. And in Daf Ayin Gimel, Rashi said it's the anvil blow on the hammer blow on the anvil in order to smooth it. Whereas here he says it's breaking a rock off the mountain. So that's one problem with the definition of Rashi. Second problem is Rashi seems to be cutting and pasting from Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's explanation, which is a minority opinion, but that's not how the Tanna Kamma is learning. So why would Rashi on Daf Ayin Gimel explain like a minority opinion here on Daf Kuf Beis on the base? Why wouldn't Rashi explain like the majority opinion, which is clearly something else? Okay, Tosus. Sorry?
Russians is different, isn't it? It's just the Gemara Halacha as well.
Okay, wonderful answer. Yes, excellent answer. So the answer to the second question of surely Rashi is saying Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's explanation is that over there Rashi says it's the Gemara Malacha, the end of the process, whereas Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says through the process when he smites on the anvil. But we'll need to unpick that a little more. Let's look at Tosfos though first. Pirush B'Kuntras. You break the rock up after you've hewed it. Very important question. To Mishkan have a binyan avonim. In the Mishkan, there's no binyan avonim. Where on earth did this melachot take place in the Mishkan? Amazing question. Where in the Mishkan did they do hewing rocks off mountainsides? They didn't. The whole point of the Mishkan is it's a temporary structure. A very detailed description of how the Mishkan was built. There's no stones in the rocks in the Mishkan that needed to be hewed off mountains. The Beis HaMikdash was built with hewing mountains, but the Mishkan wasn't built with hewing mountains. I'm sorry, the Tana, Tana, Gemara Melachot to Kedim, to have a Mishkan, he wouldn't have left the Gemara Melachot of Kedim, which were in the Mishkan, V'nokot Makar B'Patish to Evan, to have a Mishkan, Ela Nurari, to Hai Makar B'Patish, Hainu Makash Achrin, Shemaka Ala Kli, B'Shas Gemara Melachot. So the last blow that you put on the Kli at the time of Melacha. So, in brief, to summarize, we have four explanations of Makar B'Patish floating around that we've already seen. We've got Rabbi Shimon Gamliel that says any blow on the anvil, even during the course of the Melacha. We'll leave Rabbi Shimon Gamliel for now. It's analyzed later in the Gemara. We've got Rashi and Daf Ayin Gimel who says it's the last blow on the anvil of the Melacha. We have Rashi in our Sugya who says it's breaking the rock off the mountain. And we have the Ri who says it's the last hammer blow on the utensil. So again, just to make this realistic, you have, let's say, silversmith beating a kos, a Shabbos becher, into shape. And the kos is already formed. So he's not doing Boneh, he's not creating new space, he's not smelting the metal, all of that is done. So which melacha would it be that the becher needs one last blow to make it 100% perfectly straight or to smooth the silver surface of the kos? The answer is it wouldn't be another melacha, but it'd be Makar B'Patish. That's that's how the Ri learns. Okay, more than that, the Ri asked a phenomenal question on Rashi. He says where Rashi's listing explaining one of the other melachos in a way that didn't appear in the Mishkan. So I put in the source sheet, the Rishash and the Tosis Yom Tov. I'm actually not going to learn them inside in the interest of time, unless anyone wants me to. Very briefly, the Rishash and the Tosis Yom Tov remind us of something that we've discussed previously. Sorry, yeah.
Just one is slightly a fit explanation, slightly different to the other four given so
okay, let's learn the run. Fine. Okay, let's learn the run inside because I to be honest, I'm blanking on I only put the run there for one reason. But let me to Chazorah allowed of the run. V'makar B'Patish Pirish Rashi Zal Mishum Gemar Melacha Shkena Makar Lasad Mishas Gemar Melacha. So he quotes Rashi. It doesn't seem a reason that it's not a clear explanation. So Perik Habona Tanan and Masasis Makar B'Patish V'alakatoni Sefer Rabbi Gamliel Lema After Makar B'Kunas and Sadam Mishas Gemar Melacha Almud Lav Hani Makar B'Patish. So he asked our question that surely Rashi explains on Daf Ayin Gimel explains Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's view, and he therefore brings from the Rabbeinu Chananel, Sha'uman Makar B'Patish ala Kli l'shavis akmimuso. He smites on the Kli to smooth its bends, its twists. Chenal Avin Evan Shebibinyan Ashvosa l'Chaversa, and similarly a stone to align it. So I think the run is explaining like the Ri. I think the run is like the Ri, that he's saying that though I'll come to your point because as I'm reading it aloud, I hear where you're coming from. I read the run, maybe wrongly, as identical to the Ri. The only reason I brought the run was because he asked the Shiur. He's the one that asked this question that surely Rashi is like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. However, the Ri, he brings Rabbeinu Chananel that seems to be like the Ri, which is the last tweak of aligning something to make it perfect would be Makar B'Patish, straightening out the bend in the metal, or aligning rocks. When you put rocks into a wall, some are slightly further in, some are slightly further out, and you use a hammer to make them all nice and neat. That would be the definition of Makar B'Patish. I don't know now, Adam having drawn my attention to this, I don't know if he means to say literally the last one or anywhere on the process. What happens if I smooth out the the akmimut in the klee's a bit bent and I straighten it up, that is not the last blow. Would that also be included in Makam Patrish or not? I maybe superficially glossed over this and read the Rach like the Re, because he does say at the end that Yuchai Mishum Gemar Malacha. But I do hear the point that in the middle he does mention any smoothing out that akmimut. So I don't know if
That wasn't what I was thinking.
Okay.
Lines of also seems stuff that has to be on a clee.
Yeah.
Whilst the one seems to be on a clee or even on a stone. So he's combining a bit of both.
Okay, I didn't see that as a significant difference because conceptually it's the same. Tosfos is just saying, I want to hear an example that would have been in the Mishkan. But Tosfos would agree that even non-Mishkan examples would be included in the Av Malacha. So that's why I didn't see that as significant. The other reason I'm reminding myself, because I'd actually forgotten this run, is that the run is asking the stira on Rashi. The run asks, 1 minute, Rashi's explanation, Daf Ein Gimel, is Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's explanation here in the Mishnah? But he asked that question because he seems to have had a different girsa in Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. And first of all, he goes Rabbi Gamliel, we have Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. The second thing is he misquotes in our girsa what he says. He says, the Allah Katani say for Rabbi Gamliel, B'shas Gemar Malacha, at the time of the Gemar Malacha. So he asks, I don't understand, Rashi on Ein Gimel is the same as Rabbi Gamliel on our Mishnah. But our Mishnah doesn't say B'shas Gemar Malacha. Our Mishnah says B'shas B'shas Malacha. So Rabbi Gamliel's chiddush is even B'shas Malacha you are chayiv for this, and Rashi says B'shas Gemar Malacha. Okay, I hope I haven't left people confused, but just to summarize, we have 4, perhaps 5 explanations of the Malacha. What we're focusing on is Rashi. Rashi says that the Malacha, by us, Rashi says the Malacha is breaking a rock off a mountain. In Daf Ein Gimel, Rashi says the Malacha is smiting the anvil. A number of questions. First of all, why does Rashi contradict himself? Secondly, stone work isn't one of the melachos HaMishkan, so why is he giving a non-Mishkan example? Thirdly, the explanation he gives in Daf Ein Gimel seems to be the same as Rabbi Gamliel or Rabbi Shimon Gamliel in our Mishnah, so why pick a minority opinion? That question is asked by the Ran, and we can answer that question by pointing out that Rabbi Gamliel seems to say any blow, even not Gemar Malacha, is the Malacha, and Rashi is saying the last blow is the Malacha. So Rashi seems to be reading that the Chiddush of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is anywhere during the process where you strike the anvil, that's called Makah B'Patish, whereas we paskin only the completion of something is called Makah B'Patish at the end of the Malacha. Why did the Ran ask the stira? Because the Ran seems to have had a different girsa in Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, in which he seemed to say Rabbi Gamliel thought also only the last blow is the Malacha. Are people with me, or have I left everyone confused? Is this reading me clear? No. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Exactly. Sorry. Yeah, the Ran is going on the Rif, and that's the Rif girsa, but that's not our girsa in the Mishnah. Sorry, Daniel. Yeah.
Just a quick question. Why are we concerned that the examples of Malacha is not the example of Malacha in the Mishkan? We have a fear, which is not Malacha in the Mishkan. Yes, we have a Koav, but we have a whole Seder Part, which is not the example of the Malacha in the Mishkan.
Beautiful. Absolutely right. So this is all I really wanted to say, which is that the Rishash and Tosfos Yom Tov remind us of something we established already, which is there's 2 ways of thinking about the list of malachos, and this is such a fundamental point. One way of thinking about it is 39 activities that took place in the Mishkan. Another way of thinking about it is 39 activities which are fundamental to human needs and human functioning. And somehow these 2 lists work in parallel and have to coalesce. And what makes something a malacha would seem to be, Chazal didn't have perhaps a list of the 39 malachas. Maybe they worked it out. It's not entirely clear. We have indications both ways. But what would qualify something a malacha? I mean, there's all sorts of things that took place in the Mishkan. What categorizes these malachas? The answer is it seems to be that they have to align both things. It has to be something that took place in the Mishkan, which is a choshev human need, a basic human need. And as Daniel correctly pointed out, we already see this tension in the Mishnah in Ein Gimel itself, because the Mishnah in Ein Gimel lists, for example, Ofeh as the malacha, baking, whereas in the Mishkan production there was no baking. There was Mishkan in the baking in the running of the Mishkan, the lechem aponim and the shtei lechem and so on. They were baked, but in the creation of the Mishkan there was boiling, not baking. What were they boiling? The samamonim. Now, is boiling dyes for dyeing an obvious basic human functionality? Maybe not, maybe yeah. I mean, we actually do find the melachot today later, but baking is part of Siddur of the past. So the Mishnah classifies and lists the melachos not based on the Mishkan melacha, but on the human need melacha, and that's why we divide the melachos into 4 for human needs. For example, trapping animals and skinning them in the Mishkan was not part of the order of information storage melachos. It was part of trapping animals to make the. In fact, it was part of Boneh in the Mishkan, right? It was part. Why did you trap animals and shech them? There's a whole series of melachos: trapping animals, shechting them. Taking their skin off, tanning the skin. It's a whole series of melachos. Why was all that done in the Mishkan? In order to make the oihol of the Mishkan, to make the roof of the Mishkan. Why is it done nowadays? None of us are making Mishkans. Creating leather for roofing isn't a particularly chashuv human activity. It's to prepare parchment for writing. So the Mishnah lists it in Sidura to Kosev, in the order of melachot of Kosev. The Mishnah has 4 Siduras representing the 4 basic human needs: eating food, Sidura de pat, a shelter, in which it doesn't list killing animals, but it lists Boneh, what we're learning now. Kosev, information storage, where it does list trapping and killing animals, and a clothing manufacture. In the Mishkan, the weaving wasn't done for clothing. It was done for the prochus and other things. So the Mishnah is listing human functionality, and we saw that pointed out as per Ofer, the Mishnah lists the Avas Ofer, not Mavashel. We saw in the discussion of the Gemara of what comes first, Choresh or Zoreah, right? Okay, so this is really what's pointed out by the Rashash and the Tosis Yomtov, that in a sense the steer between Rashi is that Rashi in Ein Gimel is explaining what took place in the Mishkan, which is preparation of kalim and smiting anvils. Rashi Be'as is explaining what took place in human need, which is taking stones off mountainsides. However, this is a good answer to why Rashi thinks it's okay to define the Av by mountains, rocks off mountains, even though that didn't take place in the Mishnah, because all Rashi is doing is adapting the melachas that took place in the Mishkan to human functionality melacha. So in that sense, Rashi is great, and we've answered Tosis's question. We still haven't answered why Rashi chooses to explain in one place one and in the other place the other. And more than that, if the Mishnah in Ein Gimel, which we've already seen, lists Ofer is about human needs, why already there doesn't Rashi explain a human need rather than a Mishkan example? So that question remains unanswered by the Rashash and the Tosis Yomtov. But basically that summarizes the Rashash and Tosis Yomtov. They point out, Tosis asked this big question, Rashi, how can you list Makkah Bapatish as breaking rocks of mountains that didn't take place in the Mishkan? The answer is yeah, the Mishkan isn't just the melachos aren't just lists of Mishkan activities; they're also lists of human basic functions. But we don't really answer why Rashi picks one there and one here, and why, especially because the Mishnah in Nine Gimel is already listing human activity, not Mishkan activity.
So obvious. Why does Tosfot even?
I don't know. It's a pena. It's really difficult. I wonder if Tosfot's question isn't exactly the other way around. That here in the Mishnah, it may be Tosfos conceiving this as being a Mishnah, a Mishkan list. But I don't know where Tosfos got that from. Maybe on Ein Gimel, he wouldn't have been bothered by it because he understood that's a human list. That's Sidura Da. That's the whole concept of the Mishnah. This Ofer. Why are you attacking Rashi? Attack the Mishnah. The Mishnah says Ofer. Where did Ofer take place in the Mishkan? It says Rashi. So he himself made some of those points earlier when we looked at Zoe and Bo and Merakit and so on. He spoke about Oni and Osha and on Chazar and all of that, and Ayin Dalit. I don't know. It's very strange. And also, what's the answer to the steer in Rashi? We don't really have I don't have a good answer. The Rashash seems to think he's answered the steer because the Rashash there that Rashi is explaining as per the Mishkan, he's explaining human needs. But as he himself points out, already that Mishnah is based on human needs and not just Mishkan activity. So I don't know. We're left with a bit of confusion. Believe me, there will be a share this Tuesday. I'm sorry that I ended up cancelling it. Last week was very Baruch Hashem for good reasons, very, very busy Simcha week. But this Tuesday will be a share, and we will definitely have to finish off the Mishnah then because we're schlepping. So we'll focus on in the next share on just so people know what to prepare, the different ways of learning Melacha Hamiskayem Es B'Shabbos. So please have a look on that, and then we will need to move onwards. I'm sorry that we're sort of taking so long and getting through everything.